Max was a large golden retriever with a coat that shimmered like sunlight and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the ages. He had been a loyal companion to his owner, Sarah, for over 6 years. Sarah, a single woman in her late 20s, lived in a small, quiet town nestled between dense forests and rolling hills. Life was simple, predictable, and peaceful until the howling began. It started on a cold, moonless night. Sarah was jolted awake by a sound that sent shivers down her spine. It was a long, mournful howl that seemed to echo through the very walls of her house. At first, she thought it was just a stray dog, or perhaps a wolf from the nearby woods. But as the nights passed, the howling continued, always at the same time, midnight. Each night, the howl grew louder, more insistent, and more haunting. Sarah would peer out her window, trying to catch a glimpse of the source, but all she could see was the inky blackness of the night. Max, who usually slept peacefully at the foot of Sarah's bed, would sit up, ear-sperked, and let out a low growl. It was as if he sensed something that Sarah couldn't. One night, unable to bear the mystery any longer, Sarah decided to investigate. She grabbed a flashlight, put on her coat, and stepped out into the cold night air. Max followed closely behind, his tail low and his body tense. The howling seemed to be coming from the edge of the forest, just beyond the property line. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the source of the sound, Max by her side. As they neared the forest, the howling stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening. Sarah shone her flashlight into the trees, but there was nothing there. No dog, no wolf, nothing. Just an eerie stillness that made her skin crawl. Max let out a soft whine and nudged Sarah's hand, as if urging her to go back. Sarah hesitated. She felt a strange pull, a compulsion to keep going, to find out what was making that sound. But Max's unease was palpable, and Sarah trusted her dog's instincts. Reluctantly, she turned back and returned to the house. The mystery of the midnight. Howl still unsolved. Chapter 2. The pattern emerges. The next night, the howling returned, just as it had every night before. Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the mournful sound. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something she was missing. Max, as usual, sat at the foot of the bed, his ears twitching with every note of the howl. Sarah decided to keep a journal, documenting the howling each night. She noted the time, the duration, and any other details she could think of. Over the next few weeks, a pattern began to merge. The howling always started at exactly midnight and lasted for precisely 3 minutes. It was as if someone, or something, was keeping time. Sarah also noticed that Max's behavior was changing. The once playful and energetic dog had become more withdrawn, more cautious. He would often stare out the window, his eyes fixed on the forest, as if waiting for something. Sarah tried to reassure herself that it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. One evening, Sarah decided to consult her neighbor, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who had lived in the town his entire life. He was known for his knowledge of local folklore and legends. Sarah hoped he might have some insight into the mysterious howling. Mr. Thompson listened intently as Sarah described the howling and Max's strange behavior. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "That forest," he began, his voice low and serious, "has always been a place of mystery. There are stories, old stories, of a creature that roams those woods. Some say it's a wolf, others say it's something darker. But one thing is certain. Those who hear its howl are never the same." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, never the same?" Mr. Thompson's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Sarah felt as if he could see right through her. "Those who hear the howl are drawn to it, compelled to seek it out. But those who follow it, they never return." Sarah swallowed hard. She wanted to dismiss his words as mere superstition, but the look in his eyes told her otherwise. She thanked him for his time and returned home, her mind racing with questions. That night, as the howling began, Sarah made a decision. She would follow the sound, no matter where it led. She had to know the truth. Chapter 3. Into the forest. The next night, Sarah prepared herself for what lay ahead. She packed a small bag with essentials, a flashlight, a knife, some food, and water. She also brought a camera, hoping to document whatever she found. Max watched her intently, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. As midnight approached, Sarah stood at the edge of the forest, Max by her side. The howling began, just as it had every night before. This time, however, Sarah was ready. She took a deep breath and stepped into the forest, Max following closely behind. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting and intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The forest was eerily silent, save for the sound of their footsteps crunching on the dry leaves. Sarah's flashlight cast long, flickering shadows on the ground, making the forest seem even more menacing. As they ventured deeper, the howling grew, louder, more intense. It was as if the sound was guiding them, leading them to something. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its branches twisted and bent as if in agony. The howling seemed to be coming from the tree itself, but as Sarah approached, the sound stopped abruptly. Sarah shone her flashlight on the tree, and her breath caught in her throat. Carved into the bark were strange symbols, unlike anything she had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. Max let out a low growl, his hackles raised. Sarah reached out to touch the symbols, but before she could, a sudden gust of wind extinguished her flashlight. The clearing was plunged into darkness. Sarah fumbled with the flashlight, trying to get it to work, but it was no use. She was about to turn back when she heard a voice, a soft, whispering voice that seemed to come from all around her. "Sarah," the voice called, sending a shiver down her spine. "Sarah, come closer." Sarah froze. She wanted to run, to get as far away from the clearing as possible, but her legs refused to move. The voice was hypnotic, pulling her in, drawing her closer to the tree. Max barked furiously, snapping Sarah out of her trance. She turned to see her dog standing between her and the tree, his teeth bared and his eyes blazing with defiance. The voice grew louder, more insistent, but Max stood his ground, protecting his owner. Sarah finally found the strength to move. She grabbed Max's collar and pulled him away from the tree, back into the forest. They ran, stumbling through the darkness, until they finally emerged from the trees and into the open field. Sarah collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Max lay beside her, panting heavily. They'd escaped, but Sarah knew that whatever they had encountered in the forest was far from over. Chapter 4. The Truth Revealed. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to make sense of what had happened in the forest. She couldn't shake the feeling that the tree and the symbols were connected to the howling, but she had no idea how. She decided to do some research, hoping to find some answers. She spent hours at the local library, poring over old books and documents. She searched for any mention of the forest, the tree, or the symbols. It wasn't long before she found something, a faded handwritten journal tucked away in the back of the library. The journal belonged to a man named Samuel Hargrove, who had lived in the town over a century ago. Samuel had been a farmer, but he was also a student of the occult. In his journal, he described a series of strange occurrences that had taken place in the forest. According to Samuel, the forest was home to an ancient entity, a being that had existed long before humans walked the earth. The entity was bound to the tree, trapped there by a powerful spell. The symbols carved into the bark were part of the spell, designed to keep the entity imprisoned. But the spell was weakening. Every night, at midnight, the entity would howl, calling out to anyone who could hear it. Those who followed the howl were drawn to the tree, where the entity would attempt to possess them, using their body to break free from its prison. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the journal. It all made sense now, the howling, the symbols, the voice. The entity was real, and it had been trying to lure her to the tree. If it hadn't been for Max, she would have been possessed, or worse. Sarah knew she had to do something, She couldn't let the entity continue to terrorize the town. But how could she stop something that had existed for centuries? Chapter 5. The Final Confrontation. Sarah spent the next few days preparing for what she knew would be the most dangerous night of her life. She gathered everything she could find that might help her: holy water, salt, iron, and a silver dagger. She also consulted with Mr. Thompson, who gave her a protective amulet that had been passed down through his family for generations. As midnight approached, Sarah stood at the edge of the forest once again. This time she was ready. She had a plan, and she was determined to see it through. Max stood by her side, his eyes filled with determination. The howling began, just as it had every night before. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the forest, Max following closely behind. They moved quickly, following the sound until they reached the clearing. The tree stood in the center, the symbols pulsing with a faint, eerie light. Sarah could feel the entity's presence, a dark, malevolent force that seemed to fill the air around her. She knew she had to act fast. She began by sprinkling salt around the base of the tree, creating a protective circle. Then, shepherded holy water over the symbols, hoping to weaken the entity's hold. The symbols flickered and dimmed, but they didn't disappear. Sarah knew she had to do more. She took out the silver dagger and began to carve new symbols into the bark, or symbols of protection and banishment. As she worked, the entity's voice grew louder, more desperate. "Sarah, stop! You don't know what you're doing," the voice hissed, but Sarah ignored it. She focused on the task at hand, her hands steady, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Finally, she placed the protective amulet at the base of the tree. The symbols flared brightly, then faded away completely. The howling stopped, and the clearing was plunged into silence. Sarah stepped back, her heart pounding. She had done it. The entity was banished, its hold on the tree broken. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. As she turned to leave, she heard a soft, mournful howl. It was different this time, softer, sadder. Sarah looked back at the tree and saw a faint, ghostly figure standing beside it. It was the spirit of Samuel Hargrove, the man who had written the journal. "Thank you," Samuel's spirit whispered. "You have freed me, and the town. The entity is gone, but its influence lingers. Be vigilant, Sarah. The forest is a place of great power, and there are other forces at work." With that, the spirit faded away, leaving Sarah and Max alone in the clearing. Sarah took a deep breath and turned to leave, knowing that she had done what she had set out to do. Epilogue. A new beginning. The howling never returned, and life in the town returned to normal. Sarah continued to live in her small house, but she was no longer the same woman she had been before. She had faced something beyond comprehension, and it had changed her. Max, too, seemed different. He was more protective, more alert, as if he knew that the forest still held secrets. But he was also more affectionate, as if he understood the bond he shared with Sarah had been strengthened by their ordeal. Sarah never spoke of what had happened in the forest, but she knew she would never forget it. She had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, but she also knew that the forest would always be a place of mystery and danger. As the years passed, Sarah and Max grew older, but their bond remained as strong as ever. They had faced the darkness together, and they had come out the other side. And though the forest still loomed in the distance, Sarah knew that as long as she had Max by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead.